Welcome back, everybody. So this is a video going over section 9.8 day 2 for completing the square. Here's the warm-up, so go ahead and pause if you'd like to do these problems and see where we're at. All right. Now, we are going to solve these by completing the square. Let me remind you of the steps to completing the square. First step, variables to the left, constants to the right. Second step, divide through by A as needed. It's not needed in any of these, but that will come up today. Third step, find the magic number. Figure out what needs to be added to both sides to complete the square, the perfect square. Then, from then on, it's just solve by algebra. Factor, square root the opposite side, solve for your two answers. So let's do that. First step, variable to the left, constant to the right, done. Is there any A value for any of these? So step 2 is done for all 3 of these. Now, I leave a little room. I fill in the blank. What's my magic number here? 9. And that's what gets added to both sides. So it's an x plus 3 squared is equal to 4. And then when I square root it, what do I not want to forget? When I square root? The plus or minus. X plus 3 is equal to plus or minus 2. Which means I've got x plus 3 is equal to positive 2. Now, I taught my other classes this way the rest of the day. And this might help some of you. I taught my other classes, if you'd like to, you can write it like this, where I subtract over the 3 right now. What do I mean by that? Well, you can get x alone and say negative 3 plus or minus 2. Negative 3 plus or minus 2. You see how I subtracted over the 3 and I put it in front of the plus or minus? Now all you have to think about is, well, what is negative 3 plus 2? What's negative 3 plus 2? Negative 1. What's negative 3 minus 2? Negative 5. So I don't care how you think about it. If you want to get that 3 over, this is the kind of notation that we'll use a little bit more today. With the number in front of the plus or minus, but you'll see it both ways. I think on the key for the homework, I do it the way I taught you guys.
Where did you say x plus 3 from?
Remember that comes from this divided by 2. That's always that b value divided by 2. Let me move this one down a little bit more. All right, let's take a look at this next one here. I leave a little room. What's my magic number in this one? 16. 16. Because it's half of negative 8, which is negative 4, squared is positive 16. And now I say x minus 4 squared. Again, we get that from the negative 8 chopped in half. Is equal to 25. I square root 25. I get plus or minus 5. And I add over the 4 to the other side. See, this is the way I showed them. We would write it 4 plus 5, 4 minus 5. 4 plus or minus 5. 4 plus 5 is 9. 4 minus 5 is negative 1. So those are my two answers. Do our last one here. Okay, first 2 steps are done. Let's leave a little room. Fill in my blank. What's my magic number? 25. Half of negative 10 is negative 5. Squared is positive 25. So it's 25. All right, so that means I've got an x minus 5, again, negative 10 divided by 2. Squared is positive 16. So that gives me an x minus 5 is equal to, again, plus or minus 4. I add over the 5 to the other side, and that'll get me x is equal to 5 plus or minus 4, which is a positive 9, and then a positive 1. Problems, the second 2 look very similar. One was 4 plus or minus 5, the other one was 5 plus or minus 4. The 16, negative 9 plus 25.
Okay, I don't know why, but that looks like
Oh, yeah. Okay, questions on any of that? Okay, yes, sir.
As you get to the x minus 5 equal or plus or minus 4.
Yep.
What do you do from there?
I add the 5, you get x completely alone by adding the 5 over to the other side. And I like to put that thing in front of the plus or minus to remind myself I'm going to add it and then subtract it from that.
So you do both. So
You do both.
Add 5 and 4 and then you do that.
Right.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Any other questions on the warm-up? Okay, here's the homework. Check your answers on the homework. You can see the first 5 on there. After today, I'm going to kind of leave this first part behind. I know a lot of people who are like confused on what to write there in these first 4 problems. I'm just trying to like get you ready to complete the square. I'm much more happy if you can do 5 and below. Okay, so we're going to kind of leave those problems behind once we get past today. So there's the answers for 7 and 8. Sorry for my poor handwriting on this. It looks like it was an old key. This is my old tablet. And then let me scroll down a little bit more. There is the rest of 9 and 10. Answers for 9 and 10. And then here's the answers for 11 and 12. Any questions on any of those that you'd like to talk through or go over? Again, it's probably like if you got 1 or 2 of them, you probably got all of them. The only issues that I'm seeing people have, little sign mistakes. Little sign mistakes. Oh, I forgot that was a negative. Oh, I forgot to divide that by 2. Oops, I squared the wrong number. But just little mistakes here or there. Questions about that? Now, I think you guys would all agree that now that we know the process of completing the square, it's definitely more time consuming than factoring or solving by square roots. And it's definitely a lot more work than solving by square roots or factoring. Would you guys agree with that? I would think that. But what's the benefit of completing the square? What's the benefit of completing the square rather than factoring or solving by square roots?
You do the other options and then it turns out to not be true at the end.
Or maybe you can't do it in the end, right? Maybe it turns out that it's not factorable. Or maybe it turns out that you can't solve by square roots. There must be something else you could do, right? That's why we need completing the square. And that's why we'll need section 9.9. We'll learn the quadratic formula. Honestly, I have students that like completing the square and then don't like quadratic formula. And I have students that don't like completing the square and then like the quadratic formula. Honestly, they're both have their benefits and and drawbacks. So we're going to finish out section 9.8 today, finish out completing the square. And then section 9.9 is the quadratic formula. Once we get past that, we'll be done with chapter 9. Now, yesterday and in the homework, all of those numbers, and I guess I should say, all of those numbers were nice. What do I mean by nice? they were nice in that when I went to square root those things, did it ever come out as a messy number? No. It never came out as a messy number. So therefore, we got to look at what happens when it does come out as a messy number. And that's what we're going to look at today. You guys are going to find it's actually a little bit less work. I'll show you how in a second. You can cut these out. There you go. There you go. There you go. There you go. All right. So just as a reminder, I know we already went through it, but just as a visual reminder here, let's talk through the steps for completing the square and really focus on steps 1 and 2 because that's what we're going to pick up with today. Remember, what we're going to do first is collect variable terms to one side and constants to the other. Basically, you're going to want your A and your B values on the left and your C value on the right, okay? Your A and your B values on the right, on the left, left. And then your C value on the right. Variables to the left, constants to the right. Constants to the right. Step 2, as needed, divide both sides by your A term, by your A value, the number that's in front of the x squared, just the number. All you're going to do is divide through by the number so that the coefficient on the x squared term is 1. I'll tell you right now, you cannot complete the square. You cannot do this process if there is a number in front of the x squared. You cannot complete the square if there is a number in front of the x squared. You must divide it through. You must for this process to work. Do we have to do that in this case? No. Is step 1 done as well? Are the variables on the left? Is the constant on the right? Okay, so this is a problem that we could have done yesterday. Okay. Let's take a look. Let's just remind ourselves. So x squared minus 10x is equal to 39. Just kind of refresh our memories. What fills in my blank? What's my magic number? 25. I'm just doing an extra one of these. So that's going to turn it into an x minus 5 squared. Remember, the process is take this and divide it by 2 to get that. You could also logically think about the factoring as well. You know, factor 25 to the negative 10 or negative 5, negative 5. So it does factor as it should. Then on the right side, I'm going to get 39 plus 25, which is 64. Oops, yeah, you can take it. 39 plus 25 is 64. And then when I go to square root that, I get plus or minus 8. And again, I'm going to show it this way now. I'm going to add the 5 over to the other side. I kind of like this way to write it. 5 plus or minus 8. Because that reminds me that I've just got to take 5 plus 8, and then 5 minus 8. This kind of saves me from writing my 2 separate equations. 5 plus 8 is 13. 5 minus 8 is negative 3. Nope. You're just looking, and now remember, don't lose sight of the end goal. The end goal was to figure out where it crossed the x-axis. If I go to graph that function, I subtract over the 39, I put it into standard form, I put it into our graphing, put it into Desmos, guess where it's going to cross the x-axis? 13 and negative 3. Okay, we know all those other things. We could find the axis of symmetry if we wanted to, all those things. So what's our issue here? It turns out to be a decimal. What's that going to change? Nothing. That's not going to change anything. Keep it as a decimal. Keep it as a decimal. So here's what we're going to do. X squared plus 7x plus something. What we're going to look at today is what's going to make it messy? What's going to make it weird? Because all the other problems that we did yesterday were nice. So what's going to make it weird? Well, I've got to take 7 divided by 2, which is 3.5. Do I put 3.5 in my blank? What do I do to 3.5? Square it. 12.25. Don't round it. Where you can. I mean, obviously, if this was like a 0.3 repeat. Now, can I possibly figure out, logically figure out the factoring? Like, if I'm going to think about factors of 12.25 that add to 7, no, I'm not going to think about that. But do I even have to? No. Because all this is that divided by 2. So that's going to get me x plus 3.5 inside there. This is the first time where we haven't been able to really logically figure out what the factoring problem would be. But on the right side, it's 56.25. And now we go to square root it. So we say 56 square root of 56.25. 7.5. X plus 3.5 is equal to plus or minus 7.5. And now we subtract over the 3.5. Which gets me x is equal to negative 3.5 plus or minus 7.5. All right, now we just have to figure that out. See, we can't just do that in our heads. Negative 3.5 plus 7.5. That gets us 4. And we'll do the minus version. Negative 3.5 minus 7.5. Negative 11. So our answers still ended up being good numbers. The problem is that it turned into be a decimal in the middle. That's okay. That's okay. Okay, what's my issue here? What's my first issue here?
Or there's no variable, like a constant.
The constant's not on the right side. I think that's what you mean. The constant's on the wrong side. So where's that negative 5 need to go? To the right. So let's move it over to the right first. See, this is step 1. That gets me a negative x squared minus 6x is equal to 5. I'm going to leave room just in case I can complete the square. But can I do it yet? Not yet. What's stopping me from completing the square? The negative 1. What do I do with that negative 1? I divide it through. Everybody gets divided by negative 1. It's a divide through by a as needed. I need to. Everything must get divided by that a term, that a value. So this turns into positive x squared, positive 6x, negative 5. Now can I complete the square? Yes. See, there's a little bit, there's some prep work that you have to do from time to time. So what's my magic number? 9. Half of 6 is 3, squared is 9. So 9 fills in my blank, which turns into an x plus 3 squared is equal to 4. See, now from this point on, it's like the same problems we were doing last night. I square root it, I get x plus 3 is equal to plus or minus 2. And then when I subtract the 3, negative 3 plus or minus 2, which is negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. Negative 3 minus 2 is negative 5. So what made it weird this time? Well, the fact that this was not in the correct form. I had to get C over to the other side. And when I did that, I had something in front of x squared. I had a negative in front of x squared, which was no good. Can't have that. Questions about that? Okay. Take a look at the next one. Negative x squared plus x plus 90. Same thing here, right? Same thing. My constant is on the wrong side. So let's first start off by subtracting the 90. Get 90 to the other side. That's going to give me a negative x squared plus x is equal to negative 90. See, I'm going to leave my room just in case I can complete the square on the next step. But guess what? Can I do that yet? Same thing here. This is another negative 1 in front of x squared. So I've got to divide through by negative 1. And everybody gets divided by negative 1. Not just pieces and parts. Everybody gets divided by negative 1. So that means I've got x squared minus x positive 90. Okay, so now this gets extra weird. Because what's my b term? 1. And when I cut it in half, I get a decimal. So that's okay. It's negative 1. Yeah, you're negative 1. I divide it by 2. I cut it in half, and I get a 0.5. And then negative 0.5. And then when I square it, I get a 0.25. So this is another one of those ones where the factoring is going to be weird. X minus 0.5 in there. How did I get to 0.5? It was 1, or negative 1 divided by 2, negative 0.5. And then obviously on the right, it's 90.25. Now, when I go to square root it, I square root 90.25. I get a nice clean 9.5. And then I can add that 0.5 over to the other side. 0.5 plus or minus 9.5. 0.5 plus 9.5 is 10. 0.5 minus 9.5 is negative 9. Weird, right? Maybe it's not weird, it's just a lot of steps, right? That's a lot of work to show. This is your next one, right?
Yeah.
It's funny, last year was the first year I was using guided notes. Last year was the very first year I've ever used guided notes. And as I was going, there were certain things that were like different from my guided notes to my actual notes, like my screen smart notebook. But the problem is I didn't teach this last year because we were on quarantine. I didn't teach any of this stuff last year, so bummer. So I got to make sure that this all match, like my guided notes match these notes. All right, so is step 1 done for us here? Yeah. So my variables on the left, constants to the right. Check, done. Good. Is step 2 done? No. What's my a value in this case? My a value is 3. So I divide through by 3 in this case. Everybody gets divided by 3. See that here? That 3 is stopping me from completing the square. So let's do that. We get an x squared minus 8x. I'll leave a little room. Equals 9. And now we can take it from here, right? What's my magic number? 16. That's what fills in my blank, which leaves me with an x minus 4 squared is equal to 25. And oh, look at that. That comes out nice and even. X minus 4 is plus or minus 5. I add the 4 over to the other side. So it's 4 plus or minus 5. So x is 9 or negative 1. See, once we get to a point, it starts to look very similar to what we were doing yesterday. Why is that the case? Well, because we kept doing steps 3 and on yesterday. So every time it's going to get to something that looks familiar. You just got to get it to that thing that looks familiar. Let's try the next one. What am I going to divide through by this one? 2. Actually, I shouldn't even do that yet, should I? I got to get to 42 over to the right side. Sorry. People are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I add the 42. That gets me 42 on the right side now. Now I can divide through by 2. Everybody gets divided. Everybody gets 2. So I've got x squared plus 2x is equal to 21. Okay, so what's my magic number? 1. Okay, so this turns into x plus 1 squared is equal to what? 22. What happens when you square root 22? It's a decimal. So here's what we do. Here's what we do. On these types of problems, I'll tell you exactly what the quiz is going to look like right now. I'm going to ask for 2 different answers. I'm going to ask for the decimal answer and the radical answer. So here's what we need to do. We're going to square root the opposite side, and we're going to say x plus 1 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 22. And we're just going to leave it like that for right now. What would we do to get x completely alone? Subtract 1, so we're going to do the exact same thing. So x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 22. And guess what? That's my radical answer. Because what's going to happen as soon as I take the square root of 22? I'm going to have to round it. I'm going to have to take it's an approximated answer, right? It's not an exact answer anymore. That's the last step where it's exact. Because as soon as I take the square root of a non-perfect square, it's going to be an irrational number, a number that will go on forever without terminating or repeating. But I do want my decimal answers because I want to know where they end up. So we're going to take negative 1 plus the square root of 22 to get 3.69. And then we're going to take negative 1 minus the square root of 22 to get negative 5.69. And those are my answers. So on the quiz, I'm going to say, give me the radical and the decimal answer. It's going to have 2 sets of blanks. The radical answer is just putting the square root over the top of it and subtracting over the number that was with the x, or adding it over, whatever. The decimal answer, well, you just got to plug it in your calculator and see what happens. Okay, let's keep it going. What's the first thing that I have to do here? Add the 20. Get it into the correct form. So this is a negative 2x squared plus 12x is equal to 20. What do I divide through by? What do I divide through by? Negative 2. Everything gets divided by negative 2. So that gets me an x squared minus 6x is equal to negative 10. What fills in my blank? Positive 9. Negative 3 squared, positive 9. So now we say x minus 3 squared is equal to negative 1. What would you do next? Square root what? The 1? Can you square root a negative number? No. You cannot square root a negative number. There are no solutions to that. Because you, at that point, you're going to have to square root a negative number, and you cannot do that. You cannot square root a negative number. See, we learned that back in section 9.7, right? We're doing that square root section. I cannot square root a negative number, so therefore I have to say no solution. Remember, the goal here is to try to find the places where it crosses the x-axis. Do all quadratics cross the x-axis? No, there are some that do not cross the x-axis. This is an example where it does not cross the x-axis. Do one more. This almost looks like it's set up. It's not set up yet. Now look, x is on the right side, 16 is on the left side. This is all messed up. I add the 24x. That gives me 4x squared plus 24x plus 16 is equal to 0. And then I subtract the 16. If you want to do that all in one step, I wouldn't be mad at you. What am I going to divide through by? 4. Everybody gets divided by 4. So this is going to get me an x squared plus 6x is equal to negative 4. What am I going to add to both sides? 9. My magic number is 9.
And how is it negative 4?
Because it was negative 16 up here. So this turns into an x plus 3 squared is equal to 5. What will happen when I square root 5? I'll get a decimal. So this is another one of those where I will give you 2 sets of blanks. X plus 3 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 5. We leave it like that for right now. We subtract over the 3. Negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 5. That's one answer. That's my, what I would call my radical answer. My decimal answer, well, I just have to figure out what the decimals are. You say negative 3 plus the square root of 5, and negative 3 minus the square root of 5. So that'll get me x equals negative 0.76. X equals negative 5.24. Please understand that those decimals really represent that radical answer. That radical answer is equivalent to those decimals. It's just a rounded answer. Okay. Homework is up on the board, page 649 up here. This quiz on Monday. I don't actually know if that's going to happen on Monday. We'll see. Might be Tuesday. Oh, I should turn off the video. So long, everybody at home. Thanks for watching.